So Half-Life 2 RTX came out today, and there's two levels in it. It's basically a demo, an RTX demo that takes two levels from Half-Life 2, adds some ray tracing, some new textures, and some whatever else it does. I'm not entirely sure, but I know it's like completely remastered. And so I thought, why not check it out and see how well it can perform on a 4070 Ti. So I launched the game, and the first settings I wanted to test was 4K Ultra settings just to see how it performed. And it kind of performed worse than I thought it was going to. I thought it would perform a little bit better, but the performance for Ultra settings on 4K is around 5 to 7 FPS. So completely unplayable. Without DLSS or frame generation, it is completely unplayable with the 4070 Ti on 4K Ultra settings. And I just want to get something out of the way too. If you go into the settings and you set it, well, the remastered settings, if you go in there and you set it from Ultra to low or low to Ultra, there's quite a big visual difference because it just looks really bad and blurry. I don't know what it is. Low just looks really bad, but there's almost no performance difference between low and ultra. So besides changing it from low to ultra like one time, I didn't test that anymore because there was like maybe 2 to 3 FPS difference, and that was about it. So it wasn't even worth changing. If you're gonna play this, I would just keep it on ultra because low doesn't really give you any more FPS. So the next thing I did was turn on a DLSS transformer model to ultra performance, and as you can see in the background, the game is actually playing at a playable frame rate. It's staying from 45 to 60. If you're near fire effects, it will drop like kind of a lot, so you got to watch out for that. If you think you're getting a mostly 60 plus FPS experience but you haven't gone to an area where there's fire is going to lower your frame rate by quite a bit, so you got to look out for that. Either way, it still wasn't where I wanted it to be, and I just wanted to see what it would take to get 60 frames consistently or above with a 4070 Ti in Half-Life 2 RTX. So the next thing I did was enable frame generation. So once I turned on frame generation and still had ultra performance on DLSS, then the game performed much better. It was in the 60s to 70s, but it still struggled to stay above 60 all the time. And in fact, there were plenty of drops, especially around the fire effects, where it would just drop into the 50s and sometimes even 40s, still with ultra performance and frame generation at 4K. The thing that I think causes the biggest performance hit is the amount of VRAM that this demo uses, because it easily goes past 10 gigabytes of VRAM. So if you don't have at least a 10 gigabyte card, like if you have an 8 gigabyte card or below, playing this at 4K is just probably not possible above 60 frames per second, which is something that you probably could have expected. But either way, even with frame generation and ultra settings, the game still dropped below 60 at times, so that didn't get me where I wanted to be. Next, I wanted to try no upscaler, no frame generation, and at 1440p this time, and it was slightly better than, well, it was definitely better than playing at native 4K, but it still wasn't really that playable because you got from 15 to 25 frames per second. So still not really playable, and also the game looked really bad. That's another thing. If you have DLSS off, the game just looks worse. I don't know why that is, but turning DLSS completely off somehow actually makes the game look worse. So I turned DLSS to balanced and see if it got any better. And it definitely did. On 1440p with balanced DLSS, the game was actually pretty playable with 45 to 55 frames per second consistently. Sometimes it would even hit 60, but most of the time it would drop, especially around the fire effects. Once again, it was not a consistent 60 frames per second, and it was actually mostly below 60 frames per second, which means that we would have to drop DLSS to performance just like 4K if we wanted 60 FPS experience. But before we do that, I wanted to see how much frames we could get with DLSS on quality and frame generation active. And we got a ton more frames. We were in the 70s and 80s and sometimes even 90s. But of course, as you're playing through this game and there are fire effects and other effects like that, the frame rate just randomly drops as you're playing. It will go from 90 or 80 frames all the way down to 60 or below. Even with quality DLSS and frame generation at 1440p, we still dropped into the low 50s and sometimes even 40s. So at this point, I just decided to skip to 1080p and not test anymore at 1440p, because if I had to activate frame generation and ultra performance at 1440p to stay above 60, well then I might as well have kept the game at 4K and just kept ultra performance and frame generation at 4K. So dropping to 1080p without DLSS or frame generation, it got us to the 30s and 40s. So still not even hitting the 60 FPS mark at 1080p, no DLSS and no frame generation, which is crazy. Which means that you have to have DLSS at least, or frame generation, or even both if you want to have a 60 FPS experience or more in the RTX remix of Half-Life 2 on a 4070 Ti. So with all that said, I would just, if you have a 4070 Ti and you want to play the RTX remix of Half-Life 2, I'd recommend that you play at 4K and just turn DLSS to ultra performance and frame generation on. I mean, I think it's the best that you can get performance to visuals, because it actually doesn't look that bad. And frame gen, I don't know, other games I hate using frame gen, but in this game I turned frame gen on and off and I didn't really notice that much of a difference. Sometimes there was some ghosting with the gravity gun and maybe some other things, but it just really wasn't that noticeable to me. I mean, everyone's gonna have a different opinion on that, I feel like, but that was just the best experience in my opinion that I got from this game with a 4070 Ti, 4K ultra settings with DLSS performance and frame generation on. That was also the settings that I ended up using when I played through the entire demo myself. But anyways, that's gonna be it for this video. I know I don't usually make videos like this. Like, I have a few times on my channel, but I usually don't make stuff like this, so this is kind of a rare thing that I do once in a while on my channel. I just thought I might as well do it for this, and I was going to play this anyway, so I thought why not make a video out of it. But anyways, that's going to be the end of the video, so hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to hit that like button, leave a comment below, tell me what you think about the Half-Life 2 RTX remix and this video. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button because you want to be subscribed, and I'll see you next time.